So we're really pleased to welcome Ellen back.
Thank you.
Yeah, and to introduce her to our new guest, Rebecca Robinson, who I've known quite a long time. But as I say, in the spirit of these podcasts, this isn't about me. This is about giving our guests the voice. And so Rebecca, why don't you introduce yourself to anyone who wants to listen?
Yeah, perfect. So my name is Rebecca, so I'm the Chief Risk and Compliance Officer at Tenora. I met Simon maybe around 5 or 6 years ago now. So we met via a previous employer, and since I've had a great relationship working at my current employer. I've had some good times together. Definitely been through a big experience in terms of making that career jump, and most recently did a Tough Mudder as well with Simon and the wider team, which was an experience and a journey.
Yeah, that was that was particularly difficult because I just kept falling over, right?
Just a little bit,
which wasn't great. But that was that was good for some of the people who work at Shakes First, and obviously to kind of go and do something that isn't drinking.
Yeah.
With our with our clients, so that was good. So what we kind of want to talk about today, and kind of what we've set up is obviously we've spoken to Ellen in a previous episode about kind of her experiences as being kind of a chief risk officer, and then we kind of want you and Ellen to kind of really have a discussion around, well, what could you, Ellen, perhaps if you could go back in time, kind of what would you say to Ellen, who is about to take on their first chief risk officer role? And then Rebecca, also opportunity for you to ask Ellen and say, well, actually, kind of what are the things that kind of you've struggled with, and kind of what are the what are the takeaways that perhaps you can that you can kind of, if you like, learn from, if we can use that phrase, kind of give you an opportunity to really just kind of have a chat about kind of what it is to become a kind of a member of an executive team, and to kind of have a seat in front of your in front of your role, and obviously kind of over to you guys. I mean, maybe start with the with what we're going to call this episode, which obviously you don't know, but Ellen has heard me say this before. It's the title of this episode is going to be, why did I choose this risky lifestyle?
That's good. I like it.
There we go. So over to you.
Well, I think, so to answer Simon's question, if I could go back in time to the younger version of me, thinking about becoming a CRO for the first time, joining an executive team for the first time, I think one of the things I would say to myself is, don't be scared about being an SMF. I was very worried about being a senior manager, because I thought, the liability is very personal. The whole idea is that you are the named individual that's accountable if something goes wrong, no matter where that happened. And I found that concept quite frightening at first. But a very wise person once told me that you only need to be able to answer 2 questions well. If something goes wrong, you just need to be able to say, what did you know, and what did you do?
Oh, that's so interesting.
And if you can give a good account of yourself on both of those things, then you're okay. I think the other thing is, and I think possibly this is a bit of a female thing, joining an executive team for the first time, I did feel a bit of imposter syndrome. Am I really experienced enough to be around this table? Is it okay for me to speak? Is everybody watching me and sort of judging what I say and forming an impression? And I think I was just constantly looking for bits of feedback about how well I was doing.
Which I suppose when you get to that level as well, it's not something that typically you're given as well when you get to an executive level. You don't have necessarily someone above you constantly feeding you with, like, or having a sit-down appraisal perhaps as well, and having that constant feedback.
Absolutely. And what I've learned is, I used to be frightened of feedback, because I used to think somebody would only give me feedback if I'd done something wrong and I needed to change. But it's really good to get feedback. I think that's one of my big learnings of the last sort of 5 years, is unless you know what you're doing well and what you're doing badly, you're never going to make any improvements, and you're not going to learn. And if there is something that you can improve, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because you're not expected to know everything
Yeah.
all the time. And I thought that was what leadership was about, was you're the leader, therefore you have to know everything, and if you don't, you're not a very good leader.
Yeah.
But actually I think the reverse is true, that the best leaders
Yeah.
know what they know,
Yeah.
and when they don't know they don't know it.
Yeah. And also open to feedback. I found,
Yes.
having worked with a few
absolutely.
leaders in the past as well, the best leaders are always ones that are open to feedback, and you
Yes.
can genuinely deliver honest feedback,
Yes.
and they'll listen. So it definitely makes massive difference for sure.
Yeah. So I think it is useful to ask people,
Yeah.
you know, like after your first meeting, how did I come across?
Yeah.
And if the answer is, you know, either it'll be a nice answer and you'll be happy with it, or it'll give you some information to improve. So
Yeah.
you're always learning, and when you're being given feedback by your peers,
Yeah.
that's kind of a safe space, isn't it? So, you know, they're trying to help.
Yeah, definitely. And even going back as well, you mentioned imposter syndrome as well. Sometimes asking for feedback, half the time as well, you know it also will be positive. And when you receive positive feedback, that really helps as well. It almost helps build up your confidence as well.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
definitely goes a long way.
Yeah,
I can
it's
see
really,
that.
it's really important, and I always make
Yeah.
a point now of remembering to give positive feedback to
Yeah.
people, because they don't know that I sat there thinking you're very impressive and what you did was really good,
Yeah.
and they might, you know, not know themselves how their message has landed,
Yeah.
and I just think, well, I would really like it if somebody had done that for me. And I did it the other day when I was at a event and there was a panel debate, and there was this lady there who, she was the youngest on the panel by probably 10 or 15 years,
Yeah.
and she was absolutely excellent.
Yeah.
Really, really good. And she was talking about ESG. It's quite a complicated,
Yeah.
you know, subject. It gets very technical.
Yeah.
Some of it can send you to sleep. It's difficult to see the big picture.
Definitely.
And she explained it better than anybody I'd ever seen before. And
That's
I'd never
amazing.
met her in
Yeah.
my entire life, but I went afterwards. I did go up to her and say, I don't want to sound patronising, but
Yeah.
you were really, really good. And I said, you seem, you know, to be much younger than everybody else, and
Yeah.
you know, I thought you just did an excellent job.
It's so nice to
She
be
was really
recognised.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I felt in that moment, I felt on the one hand incredibly old and also possibly very patronising, but it
I
went
think
down very
knowledgeable.
well.
I think as well, sometimes as well, it could take 5 seconds perhaps of your day, but she'll carry that forward with her for a very long time. Now she'll always look back and remember that feedback, and perhaps that's the confidence boost she needed as well.
Yeah.
To then go forward and do, perhaps she was nervous to speak, and then she'll go forward next time and have the confidence to do it,
Yeah.
which is really
I
amazing.
hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully, fingers crossed.
We'll see.
So let's keep this going. So Ellen, obviously you've worked for a number of organisations over your career. And I think most of them have been quite large. I think you know, and then sort of Rebecca, you've worked in the more, if you like, they probably describe themselves as kind of agile and entrepreneurial. Not to say larger organisations aren't, but you know, to try and kind of make that comparison. I think where you've worked there's been much, if you like, less perhaps structure. And so kind of one of the things that kind of I wanted to kind of get you both talking about is how have you kind of found that transition from, if you like, a larger organisation where you reported to an executive committee member to going into a fintech startup, you know, with all that excitement, where that wasn't that structure, and actually it was kind of it's down to you, right?
Yeah.
You got to do it, and you said a little bit about that. You're not going to be expecting to getting patted on the back all the time with feedback.
Yeah.
You've got to do it. And kind of how have you kind of managed to manage that transition from going from where there was a certain amount of structure to actually, well, the only way there's going to be structure now is if I work with the executive team and kind of put it in place for the good of the business. And I kind of really want to think about actually the commercial realities of that.
Yeah.
Because you are working in a tech startup. And that's very exciting.
Yeah. I think the first part that I found perhaps challenging and had to come to realise was I know myself that I'm very much used to working as a perfectionist. So going from a larger corporate, I suppose, where it did have structure, etc., and you are reporting up to the board level, there's a certain level of detail, etc., you'll be expected to report up, and there's a certain level of detail required behind your work. And I think from going to almost having to work in that sort of perfectionist sense to then understanding that actually everything is quite time sensitive. It's less about being perfect, but more about making those decisions, taking on the risk as such, and accepting the fact that given the nature of a startup, you are going to make mistakes, and you might not necessarily make the right decision, but at that point in time, you have made the right decision for the size of the firm. So one of our co-founders, I remember, we have a technology strategy call every week, and he described it really well, where he said and almost compared us to working in the sense that we're in a blizzard. So given the nature of a startup, you're always being blown from side to side. You need to keep on moving forward. But if you don't keep on moving forward and making those decisions, then your feet will get stuck in the ice. And then we're not going to push forward and we're just going to slip back. And I think for me, that really resonated. I think that's definitely what I've struggled with the most. It's the decision making. You need to know that you're going to make those mistakes. But equally, it's fine to make mistakes. And if you don't make mistakes, then how are you going to learn? So I think that's definitely been the most challenging part with the transition. And then also just structure and prioritization. I just want everything to be done at once. I'm a very impatient person, which is probably more about my personality. So I think that's also something I've found particularly challenging, making sure that I prioritize. I start and I finish something, but also whilst being agile and understanding that it's fine as well, if something becomes more of a priority, to drop it. Whereas when you're in a structured firm, you have set deadlines, but you're working underneath someone's deadline. Whereas given the nature of a startup, I'm setting those deadlines. And so it's up to me, I suppose, to adjust those. So I think time management and knowing when to stop has also been quite struggling. Again, with a startup, there's a race against time. You're so excited to get a product launch, you're so excited to push forward, and you want to do it in the best possible way. But also going back to your commercial comment, you've got to be commercially minded, that sometimes you don't have all the time to make a product perfect, but you just need to push forward. And I think accommodating for that as well has been a challenge. Definitely been a challenge, for sure.
So Ellen, wow. So what would you bringing your experience to bear, and particularly maybe thinking about data and having enough information on which to make decisions, and how would you respond to that, and maybe if you like, say, well, Rebecca, in your position, not that I pretend to know everything about what's going on at your organisation, but maybe we could lean into some of these coping strategies.
Well, I think the whole idea of fintech startup is not something that I'm familiar with, but I do have two friends who work in that sort of environment, and pretty much 24 hours a day. I think my personal preference is, and that's probably why I ended up in the type of organisations I have, is to make sure I've got the right data to make the decision and not feel terribly rushed.
Yeah.
So I think it would be uncomfortable for me personally.
Yeah.
To have that immense time pressure and resource pressure, because there can come a point, and you may run out of money, or you may funding's a problem, and you can't jeopardise that. So in that sense, your risk management is, I guess, being done really dynamically and in real time and changing sort of moment to moment.
Yeah, dynamic definitely captures that perfectly.
Yeah, so I think maybe that's something that maybe everybody should experience a little bit of, to on their journey to being a CR, CO, so that they understand what that's like. But it sounds incredibly interesting and very fast-paced, and it's just different. It's a different set of considerations, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely see why it has its benefits. I mean, going back to your original question, going from such a different organisation size, it's an amazing opportunity. You're starting with a blank canvas and being able to build that entire risk management framework from scratch. Because a lot of the time you're going to a firm, and rather than looking at the preventative controls, you're looking straight away at the detective controls rather than preventative, because that structure's already there as such. So it's almost having the ability as well to work in the opposite way around than perhaps what I would have been used to. So it's actually quite interesting in the sense that you have that opportunity to actually work out, okay, first of all, what are our preventative controls, what can we do differently, and where are the real life risks? Whereas a lot of the time when you go into a firm that's perhaps more established, you're almost working from a risk management framework that's been there to tick box, and it's almost a legacy framework. And it's got all the risks because they're the risks at the time that were accepted. It hasn't been updated in a while, so your controls are almost slipping behind as well. So it's been exciting in that sense.
Yeah, so I really like what you said there, the real life risks.
Yeah.
Right? Things that again, real stuff that matters.
Yeah.
And and the reason kind of we kind of invited you on and then gave the title to this podcast, you know, why did I choose this risky lifestyle?
Yeah.
Is because actually, you know, when you're working in this fintech environment, this startup environment, it is real risk management.
Yeah.
That you're much closer
Yeah.
to the the cash flow.
Yeah.
Whereas in larger organisations, you know, cash flow forecast, that's someone else's problem. There's always loads of money, right?
Yeah.
In large organisations. I know it doesn't feel that way when you're in there and
There's
resources.
never any question that we'll run out of money.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're risking everything.
Yeah,
It's a different
exactly. And so
profile.
when you're in this kind of startup mode, particularly tech first startup that you're in,
Yeah.
it is really, you really have to dig in and think about what are the real risks here and how do we manage them kind of effectively. And so
Yeah.
that was, you know, the fact that you already used the phrase real life
Yeah.
risk, it already kind of, I guess, you know, gives everybody confidence that you're going to be one of those CROs that actually thinks commercially about
Yeah.
about what's going on.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things that we were talking about in the previous episode.
Well, I guess there's no better way to learn about commerciality than to be in that sort of environment where you literally are risking everything. And you know, especially
Yeah.
where you have sort of founders who have their own, you know, their own personal
Money tied up.
wealth tied up. You
Yeah.
know, it's a completely different thing, isn't it? So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're always having to be commercially minded, I suppose, with every decision that you make. Being mindful that obviously, exactly like you've phrased it very well before, like the money will run out. There is going to be a point in time where we do need to get feet off the ground and just go full ahead. But I think using your risk management framework to actually structure that, understand the risks, that helps safeguard the money as well, because then you know that you're actually protecting, I suppose, any potential loss, for example, and making sure that you understand where the risks are to prevent that from happening in the future.
Yeah, so theoretically, obviously, the money will run out.
Yeah.
But of course, if you are ahead of those risks in collaboration with your founders, your other members of the executive committee, obviously, you are thinking about, well, when does the money run out?
Yeah.
We know that that's a long way away. Oh, and look, we've secured all this funding. So
Yeah.
actually, as a result of being on top of our risks, we've
Yeah.
secured the funding so that the money doesn't run out, which
Yeah.
is kind of the situation that you find yourself in, which is great because
Yeah.
you've kind of gone through a process where you've really thought about how you're going to kind of manage this business together as an exec team, and now
Yeah.
you're kind of almost kind of ready to launch and have launched some certain products, which again is really kind of really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thinking about, again, coming back to why did I choose this risky lifestyle? So why? So what was on that kind of decision path? I mean, you know, how did you go from, you know, kind of whatever it is you were doing to, oh look, I'm now a CRO. You know, so Ellen.
Well, mine was kind of accidental almost in a way. So I'm an accountant by background, and I was working as a management accountant in a bank, and I was the finance business partner to the CRO. And at that time, I was the financial controller for technology. So it was a large technology budget in most banks, as you can imagine. At that time, risk technology was becoming a lot more expensive. So when you're doing cost allocations, which was kind of the world that I operated in, the risk team were very keen to understand why am I paying so much for technology. So I was spending a lot of time with them and with the head of operational risk at the time, explaining that. I therefore got to know them. Somebody left in their department, and my future boss said, "You know, would you like to apply for the role?" And I said, "No, absolutely not, because I don't know anything about risk." But you know, I thought, well, okay, if he's asked, then you know, I must be able to learn.
Yeah.
And so I started doing, you know, a CAO type of role, and with an operational risk sort of lens. And then through various other roles, you know, kind of ended up getting to, you know, where I wanted to be, which is to do a CRO role. But it was completely accidental. I didn't decide that I wanted to work in risk, but it just
felt right and happened.
It felt right. It was
Yeah.
at the right time. I liked the people. It was an opportunity to learn different things. I
Yeah.
felt like it opened up my world because it helped me to understand the whole business rather than just sort of being quite myopic.
You do have so much exposure when you sit within the risk department because naturally you have to speak within each individual department.
Yeah.
Which I do think is really interesting about being within the risk as a whole.
And that's what I tell my teams all the time is you have across the whole business view.
Yeah.
Very few people have that.
Yeah.
So you've got knowledge and experience and stories to tell around the data that you're pulling out of various systems.
Yeah.
That's where you can add value, is to
Yeah.
give that cross business view.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially within risk as well. I feel like you're learning all the time because there's always a change in regulation or the environment in which you work is changing all the time, especially, the nature of a fintech. That's so fast paced that every risk that emerges is a result of that particular industry, I suppose, diversifying as well as a result. So I feel like within risk, you can never possibly get bored. There's always a new risk that comes up as such that's going to be a hot topic in that particular month.
You are never.
You can't get bored.
I don't. There is a perception
As much as
that
people
it might
think
be, that it might
compliance
be
risk
quite
is boring.
boring.
Yeah.
But I have never been bored.
Yeah.
Because if I had been, I think I probably would have changed again, done something else.
Yeah, absolutely. I could never imagine being in a job where you're not learning something new every day or something doesn't change. I could never be in such a static job. It does
Yeah.
keep things exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Especially because as well, especially when you're perhaps more applicable for you, but in a larger organisation, when you're talking about risk, you're talking about risk in the real world.
Yes.
So something could happen in relation to, say, a political event, for example, and all of a sudden that has a direct impact in the business in which you're facing. So it's not just internally and stuck within your organisation, it's more seeing how the real world actually impacts your business model as well,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
I find extremely,
It's an absolutely integral part. You can't
Yeah.
ignore the world around you because
yeah,
you can, but you won't last.
yeah, absolutely.
Whatever kind of organisation you are.
Yeah, for sure.
And how those
Interesting.
events impact your revenue streams,
Yeah,
and how those
You have to
events
understand
might
that.
have
yeah,
an impact on your revenue streams.
yeah,
And then kind of thinking about, because that's where the real business value comes in.
yeah,
It might be the case that lots of people know it intuitively,
yeah,
but it's not until somebody or a group of people get together, write it down, and okay, really?
yeah,
This is what we're sensitive to. Yeah, we better do something about that, because it is ultimately about, as we've said, it's kind of about actually revenue,
yeah,
not necessarily revenue protection, but actually how do we use kind of risk management, small r, small m, as a way of kind of building in growth and helping us scale. Let's come back to the question now for you, Rebecca, although I'm not quite sure that you answered why did I choose the risky lifestyle, but maybe
I
I feel like
maybe
risk
we'll
chose
dig
you.
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So Rebecca,
Yeah.
why did you choose a risky lifestyle?
The honest answer, it also shows me. So, I wanted to be a doctor. I fell into foreign exchange payments and fintech firms just because I really enjoyed the nature of them. Very much started working within a financial crime role, so looking at anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing, proliferation financing. Found that extremely interesting. Again, going back to the real world, you can definitely see the impact of all three of those channels or streams and how they impact everyone's everyday living almost. So found that extremely interesting, but I hate sitting still, not learning something new every day, so I didn't want to be siloed or pigeonholed into one particular area or avenue. And so I suppose naturally then fell within risk and compliance, going back to the reason we said before. It just opens so many doors and it provides so much exposure and it's so fast paced and you're always learning something new. There's always something that you can then look into next and it provides a lot of opportunity. So I'd say it also
You know
chose
what's
me.
absolutely fascinating?
What?
I also wanted to be a doctor.
Did you?
I had a place to study medicine
I think there's time for us
at
to
university,
Did you?
and I didn't get the necessary grades at A-level.
Yeah,
So that was my first fail fast and learn moment.
that's so interesting.
Yeah,
Maybe people that are born to be risk started off wanting to be a doctor. It's a thing.
very
So
possible.
did you just say, Ellen, that basically risk people, if that's even a phrase, are kind of failed doctors. Is
Yes.
that kind of what you said?
I think in this small sample of two,
In this small
that has
sample
been
of
the
two.
case.
Oh,
but
we're
I,
going
I,
to.
I wouldn't want to infer any sort of trend.
Yeah.
Oh, so
from
we're
that.
going to
It's
statistical significance and boring numbers.
Yeah. I don't
Good. Did
want
you
it.
say you were an accountant?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
boring numbers.
Yeah. What can I
Someone's got
say?
to do them.
Yeah,
someone's
exactly.
someone's got to
Yeah.
look at those
Yeah.
pesky numbers.
Yeah.
But talking about the pesky numbers.
Yeah.
So we're gonna be talking about it again in another episode. Thinking about kind of financial modelling, but from a business perspective. So if we let's leave the pesky numbers alone for a second. We'll deal with that at another time. I asked Ellen a question in a previous episode about when did risk management become all about regulatory compliance? And so I have a view. Ellen, you shared your view, and now I kind of want to ask you, Rebecca, right? Kind of this question, because whereas myself and Ellen, we've kind of been CROs, and forgive me for saying this, but we are a little bit older than you, Rebecca.
No.
So we kind of got into this profession. I'll be honest, kind of regulatory compliance, right? It wasn't really a big phrase.
Yeah.
But now so you are from what is the, if you like, the OG regulatory compliance function.
Yeah.
If I'm allowed to say that. So I think Anna's saying, all right, boomer. But financial crime.
Yeah.
So you really know how to tick boxes, right?
Yeah. I do. Or not how to tick box.
Yeah.
I can't believe he said that. I can't believe it.
So from that perspective, do you see risk management as exclusively a regulatory compliance activity, or what's your opinion on that?
No, I think I can definitely, I know we have touched on this, but I can definitely see, as soon as you hear regulatory compliance, people switch off. And they don't see it as a positive. They see it as purely a tick boxing exercise. But I do strongly believe that if you get your risk management framework right, it's so far from a tick box exercise. So long as you stop and you take the time to actually understand your business model, and so long as you understand your business model from end to end, you can therefore understand where the risks lie. So you know, therefore, where your inherent risks are. And I think that needs to be the first stage. So long as you understand your inherent risks and you understand the industry in which you're working, so you can understand the controls you can apply, I think that's when you start getting a lot more value from a risk management framework. It steps away from being that tick box exercise by saying, okay, we understand where the risks are in our business, we know what we need to do to prevent them, we know the residual risk as a result of the controls we've therefore put in place as a business. And that's when, going back to how you mentioned, a risk management framework can be seen to support your commercial model, and you can be seen to be protecting your revenue as such, because you're making sure those controls are in place that actually aren't just tick boxing, they actually relate directly to your business model. So a really big example of that, especially within our world, within the fintech and payment world, is fraud, for example. So fraud is one of the biggest risks as such that firms, especially as a startup, will be exposed to. So making sure you've got the anti-fraud controls in place to mitigate that particular risk, it means that with, for example, the mandatory reimbursement of fraud coming into place, you're less likely to actually fall victim to that, whereby you're having to, reimburse your client, obviously subject to the rules, etc. But it therefore means, again, you're protecting your revenue. So you're using your risk management framework not actually to tick box, but you're using it to put your controls in place and to mitigate actually any significant commercial loss as a result of a control failing.
Yeah. So, but even then, okay, we did lean into
tick box then.
Yeah. We didn't. It wasn't tick boxing.
Okay.
That's not where I'm going. But we did lean into kind of regulatory compliance, where you talked about APP fraud reimbursement, but which actually at this point in time doesn't even apply to you because you're a fintech startup. And so have you got any kind of, again, stories where you've thought to yourself, and both of you thought to yourself, do you know what, this risk management framework, I just identified a place where we can gas it up, right?
Yeah.
Actually, we want to take more of these risks because we want to take more of these risks so we can generate more revenue because revenue is a byproduct of risk taking.
Yeah.
Right?
I think a really good example of that, and actually the way in which we help develop that and perhaps interpret it in this particular way was driven by a conversation I remember having with you quite clearly. So previously in place...
Getting tested.
places where I have worked in the past, a lot of our risk appetite statement and framework has been driven by the number of high-risk clients per se. So previously we'd have a threshold where, you know, if you exceed X percent of your total client base, then you've exceeded your risk appetite and your threshold. But really what you should be doing is saying, okay, well, there's an opportunity here. Yes, you need to make sure that from a regulatory standpoint, you've got the necessary controls and resource to support a larger book that comprises of more high-risk clients. But it doesn't come down to a tick box exercise where you say, okay, now we've exceeded, let's say, 5% of our total client portfolio. We don't stop onboarding clients. We're more commercially minded where we say, okay, well, they're going to generate a certain amount of revenue. And yes, they do typically pose more risk. But again, going back to your risk management framework, so long as you have the controls in place and you have the resource allocated to be able to implement your EDD and to support your ongoing monitoring framework, well, then you've mitigated the risk and you're still allowing revenue. But you're supporting the regulations, but you're also being commercially minded. So I think there's definitely a balance between regulatory compliance, understanding what the regulation requires and drives, whilst also making sure that your risk management framework is dynamic, which was a key word that we spoke about earlier.
Good. So I think what I just heard was putting in the right level of controls. So if you like, right sizing the control framework, so actually that we can take on, you know, more high risk clients. Because actually that's where the revenue opportunity is, but we do it in a safe way, and we've got the right safeguards in place so that if we do see certain types of activity from these higher risk clients, we can cut them off and identify any activities that we don't like. So, but in the meantime, because we've invested in these controls, let's gas it up and let's put pressure on the sales team.
Yeah, not to be afraid
to go and chase this revenue.
Yeah.
Much easier said than done, of course. So Ellen, story, you know, another story. Where in your career, you know, have you ever kind of seen an opportunity where actually, do you know what, we're going to take more of this risk because we've got it right and because we can make more money?
All the time, yeah. And I really like the expression, why do you have brakes on the car? So that you can drive faster.
Yeah.
So it's not being a CRO and working in risk is not all about telling people they can't do things. And if you really limit your risk appetite, which is very tempting, particularly for a board, if you say to them, are you comfortable doing this? No. Are you comfortable with it? No. All you end up with is a controlled environment that's too expensive for you. So you have to be able to say, and obviously it's a very difficult balance to strike, you have to be able to say, I will take more risk in this particular area, but I'll do it in a controlled way, and if it doesn't work, I'll stop.
Yeah.
And that is having that information and understanding your appetite properly and understanding how that relates back to the real commercial world is absolutely invaluable, because that's sort of your framework for doing everything is I'll try a bit of this over here, here's how much I'm prepared to tolerate, if it doesn't work, I stop, I do something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Good, thank you.
My one question was just in relation to, you obviously mentioned you sit on the executive committee. So if you go into a board meeting, how do you get people to listen to you from a risk perspective? Because something I always struggle with is you get heard when something goes wrong because then there is a risk, but preparing for a risk, I suppose, to happen that hasn't yet happened. I suppose how do you get people to listen to what you have to say? I think
they need to understand and own their part in it. So when I was talking about risk appetite just now, I think that is the best way to engage, is to say, you are setting this risk appetite.
Yeah.
You are telling people how much risk they're allowed to take, how much they need to spend non-control, and therefore how they need to allocate their resources. So they then feel a sense of ownership of that.
Yeah.
And so that you're not just coming to them saying, this has gone wrong, or this you know, because as you say, people will focus on, you know, the risks that are red, or, you know, there's been something has happened and they want to understand why, which is understandable.
Yeah.
But risk management, by its very nature, is a proactive thing. So you'll never get away from being in a situation where you have to deliver some bad news, or you have to say that something's gone outside of appetite.
Yeah.
But how you get people to listen is because they feel a sense of ownership of that, and they need to hold you to account for putting it right.
Yeah.
You know, it's okay that something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
Have we learned from it? Have we corrected it? And, you know, will it happen again going forward?
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I suppose just whenever you go through and you like set aside like roles and responsibilities, a lot of the time they can just feel that it's a paper exercise with no like substance behind it. But I think exactly like you said, that's an interesting take on it. It's all about accountability and ownership, and have an understanding what people are actually accountable for. And it draws us back to what you first said about like being nervous to have an SMF, for example. It's about making sure that other people as well have as much of like an awareness about what that actually means, perhaps as well.
Yeah, I think it's very dangerous to not understand how serious it is to be an SMF.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think it's also, on the positive side, it does add value, because if you're the person who's responsible for something, under SMCR you need to be able to demonstrate A, that it's happening properly, and B, that you're receiving assurance that it's happening and it's happening in the right way. So putting that sort of line of communication and that assurance into place is helpful. Because you don't always know what is, somebody several levels below you in the organisation doing. Are they doing it properly? Have there been any issues? But you're accountable, so you need to collect all that data, and you need to be able to evidence that what you're responsible for is happening in the right way. So it's helpful to have that framework in place, but perhaps very naturally, given the way that the risk brain works, you probably focus more on the downside than
I think so
than the upside. And so I think it's initially I found it quite terrifying. But I think it's important to kind of make sure that when you're bringing people into an SMF position or a certified role, that they understand these are the advantages. Yes, it is very serious, and yes, with the SMF 17 brings up the risks of the personal liability and so on. But actually, within this organisation, here is how we deal with this. This is what we expect of you. And if you've got these things in place, then you know that you're doing a good job. And if something does go wrong, then you can evidence that the decision that you made at the time was the right one, given the information that you had.
Absolutely.
So it needn't be a millstone around the neck. It can actually be quite useful.
That's excellent. Great. Thank you very much, Ellen. Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thanks for coming on again, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
And as I say, we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Definitely.
Thanks very much.
You too.
Excellent.
You.